Mark Seither, Solutions Architect for Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and we're going to look at the AI factory in action and doing basketball play classification. So this NBA team, one of the other things they said to me, but aside from we want to get better with document intelligence because it kills us, the other thing that they told me was we want to do interesting things with video because that's one of the biggest assets that we have, right? We've got game film, we've got practice film, we've got 1,000 cameras in our stadium, right? Could we be doing more with this data? And so the piece that we wanted to do for them, they actually came to me with the idea and they said, could you do something around player fatigue? So like with a camera and using video, could I notice if a player is fatigued? Okay, what does that mean? Did their gait change? Or are they not fighting through screens? Are they not fighting, like over screens through pick and roll? So are they not getting back on defense? Are they gassed, right? Do they need to be taken out? Could we get insights like that? And so I took that and I went home and I spent some time in the next couple of weeks and I started building something. And it was a very simple idea. What I wanted to do was take an open source model, right? And it's called SlowFast from Facebook Research, if anyone's familiar with SlowFast. SlowFast is a classification model, video classification model. It has two pathways. It has a fast pathway and has a slow pathway. The fast pathway is meant for movement, higher frame rate, lower resolution. The slow pathway is meant for objects, right? So I think object detection. So it's a high resolution, but a low frame rate, right? So more for like what's going on statically in the image or the series of images. And I wanted to see if I could take something, because they currently have a team of analysts that the coach will be like, I want to see this. And then their analysts go and they sit down and watch videos to find, they're like, oh yeah, I think I remember that like from this game back in the playoffs in 2017. Let me go see if I can pull up these clips, right? That's kind of the process. And so I said to myself, I think, and I'm going to switch over to my, here.
So they labeled the videos for you? Is that how?
I labeled them by hand myself, just because I want to see what was possible. There's a lot of other interesting pieces, and I'll tell you about where I'm taking this, and maybe you'll think it's cool. I think it's fun. This is the platform itself, that software platform, and I want to show you this before I dive in deeper. This is the platform. So this is AI Essentials. So this is the software aspect of PCAI, and it has on it, you can see like this is kind of a getting started page. There's not like a ton of interesting information on here other than I would say like recent items, the top frameworks. You can see your utilization of all of these different tools and what you're actually doing with them. The getting started piece is we've been doing this for a long time and we've got a lot of things that our customers crib from, right? We've built things and showed in these examples how to use all of these different tools, how to connect to different sources of data. And so as part of that, we want customers to take what we've done and use it to stand on, right? Use it to continue and go further and develop with it. So we've provided a lot of documentation around that.
SlowFast integrated here, or is that just something you were playing around?
SlowFast was an external model that I brought in just because I wanted to. It was what I thought most appropriately matched what I wanted to do. So I brought that in, and I can tell you more about that with MLIS. Remind me, MLIS is, I'll talk about it in my flow. I always start this off with the data, and I'm going to breeze through this because there's a fair amount of meat to actually get to. Click on data sources. Those connections to external data sources, this is that, right? How do I allow you to connect to all of your enterprise data? Whether it's structured data or objects, stores or S3 buckets, or actual like NFS shares, different volumes that I have. There's also a shared volume on here that you can utilize backed by GreenLake for file. And so this is a place where teams now can collaborate, right? And develop notebooks, for example, together, right? So, and you can share data. This is how I set my example up. So you'll see it. But when I want to go add a new data source, right? We've defined a number of different data sources that we can go and connect to, right? And so like the easiest ones to understand is like, great, connect to SQL Server. Give me a URI, a connection, a user, and then a password, and I can connect to it. And no one else gets to see it. This is mine, right? But anyone else on the platform can't see my data source. It's just mine. You can do service accounts if you want more broad access, but there's RBAC throughout the entire platform, right? So role-based access control over all of my data assets that are in the platform. So if I have access to it, then I have access to it on the platform. If they don't, then they still don't. So that's probably pretty good on that component, and we'll get into the most interesting pieces. the tools and frameworks.
So with the data sources, you were using the obviously NBA video. What did you use to suck that in there? Is that something that comes with it, or did you have to do something special?
So I cheated a little bit, and I'm willing to admit that because I'm a hacker, right? And I like to do things quick and dirty. And so what I did was, and this will be, I think, interesting for you. I was like, okay, I need to go find videos that I can take, and I can create a data set out of those videos that's labeled data so that I can do training on it. And so what I did was I went out to YouTube, and I used a clip grabber, grabbed it from YouTube, used QuickTime, did a screen recording of it, created compact clips that showed examples of pick and rolls, examples of isolations. And then I took that, labeled them with an external tool that I brought onto the platform. There's a tool called Label Studio. Label Studio is an open source, they have an enterprise version, but it's an open source data labeling tool, right? And so I took it, and it's actually right here. I took, and you can see that lsapp.aie. This is actually running on the system. And so you can come in here. The one that I actually did it on, just because I was doing things fast, was I did it here. So you can take these, and there's a couple of different folders full of them that I have, where I have ISOs, I have pick and rolls are here called basketball plays, but you can go through and you can label them, right? And so I just went through, I labeled all the tasks. So, but at the end, you can essentially see this checkbox down here. That's how I labeled them. What I did there is it then gave me I exported a JSON document essentially that had a unique identifier for the video clip, and it had a label, right? And then I took those videos, and I uploaded them directly to my data storage pane that I was just in. So here, under data sources, in data volumes, under shared, you've got, I put it inside of this folder just for this one. This is actually not the system that I developed it on. It's another one that I'm using or borrowing from somebody. But under data, you've got videos, and then in videos, you've got all of my different PR is pick and roll, or pick and roll is pick and roll, and ISO is ISO, right? So two different classes that I created, and then I took that into a Jupyter notebook that has connectivity to this out of the box. Didn't have to do anything there. And I used it to train that SlowFast model, right? So what that actually looks like, and I don't know, how many of you are like deep and heavy coders? I'll give a little bit of depth, not a lot of bit of depth, because I don't want to put people to sleep.
Yeah, they don't deserve that.
No, I understand. I really do. So what I did was I took that open source model, and I took the data set that I created. And essentially all I'm doing with all of this is I'm taking in the two different JSON files that are the labels and the unique identifiers for those videos. I create one CSV file out of all of those that maps to the actual video assets that I have. I do some imports, right? Some installs of some packages and some libraries that I need. And then I come down, I define what my data set actually is. I create my data set. So I created a label map. And this is my the pandas read the video label CSV. And then I create that data set, right? So that's it. And then load my pre-trained SlowFast model, right? So I load it, and I'm not running this because training the model actually takes, I put one GPU in it. It took about an hour and 20 minutes or so. And it's an L40S GPU. That number gets better if it's a better GPU with more memory. I also did this in a memory safe way. So I didn't want to blast it, and if I have a situation where I ran out of memory because I was using kind of smaller GPUs for a fairly intensive task. I did 10 epochs of training. And then, so I loaded it, trained my model. Like I said, it took approximately an hour and 20 minutes or so. And you can see like the actual, like going through the batches and the different epochs and the accuracy. It actually hit by like the third epoch. It kind of hit like a plateau. But I just did it because I was testing what could be done with it. So I trained it, saved that model, creates a .pth file in my directory, right? I just told it where to save it. So this SlowFast pick and roll .pth right there, that is my model, right? My trained model. And then I can take that trained model and I can go and run against it. And I can say, this is a predict clip function. And so when I run my predict clip function, it goes and grabs, and I have actual examples of this, the ones that I did, and I'll show you because I think it's worth it. This is the pick and roll that I gave it. If you saw, he picked for, is that Beasley? He picked for him, and then he rolled to the basket, got the ball. One of the limitations that I've seen that I'm working on developing a way around is that it doesn't a pick and roll can be anything that you do a pick and roll on. You don't have to pass the ball. You can do a pick and roll, the guy can roll to the basket, and I can keep the ball and shoot it, or I can pass it to somebody else. It's still a pick and roll, right? The structure is still there. It likes when they pass the ball, the accuracy is better when they actually do make the pass rather than when they don't make the pass, right? So I'm working and thinking about ways that I can kind of incorporate that knowledge into this. So that's the pick and roll.
Is that an artifact of your training data set, perhaps?
Yeah, and I had to work with this a little bit because I did one where I included other videos that were not of NBA games, like high school games. And it was such a different video that it degraded my accuracy fairly significantly.
Right.
So I had to kind of strip out some of that information and just kept it to this view in particular, right? Which is, again, fairly standard, at least in the clips that I've seen from like actual organizations where like they have that bird's eye view, and that's a lot of times how they break those plays down when they're doing analysis. And then this is the ISO. It's Mitchell, which he does a couple of crossovers, some hesitations, and then trains it on him. And so these are the two clips that I feed it. The model has never seen those two clips before. And so when I can run it again right now, but when I ran it, it predicted correctly that the first one, chunk 20, was a pick and roll, and that chunk 18, that's just what I had them called on my local one, I didn't bother renaming them. Chunk 18 is an isolation. I think the isolation is a much more easily recognizable play because it only involves a single player, and that movement is fairly constrained. And so it seems to be much better at recognizing an isolation versus a pick and roll.
What was the size of the training set?
It was, and I noticed something when I was on the plane out here, it was supposed to be 10 and 10, which is a small training set, I know. But it's actually one of the most time-consuming things is just creating the training set.
Yeah.
And so I noticed on the plane out here, though, that one of them I did not label appropriately, and so it actually ended up being 9 and 7 because I stripped out some of the ones that were making it perform less ideally, and then it went to 9 on one of them because, or no, 7, went from 8 to 7 because I didn't label one of them. So, but a small training size and actually pretty decent accuracy for what it did.
Well, I mean, you're in dev test, so that you just, it's almost like a mini POC, or you're proving the case, and then you expand the trainings, then now you promote.
And that was kind of my thought. And so now, the piece that I'm very excited about with this is now, this is cool. And this is more traditional kind of ML. It's not using LLMs or VLMs, video language models, right? It's not using any of those. It's more traditional than that, right? But I think the next opportunity that I have with this is I'm going to take this model. We have a tool on the platform called MLIS, Machine Learning Inferencing Service, HPEs. This tool under data science gives you the ability to create registries of models and then create deployments of those models, right? So I'm going to take this, and I already did this component, this piece of it. I was trying to get it for this presentation. I ran into a couple of hiccups because I've never used Bento ML before, but I'm going to package it up as a Bento file, or a Bento ML file, or model, and then deploy it from an S3 bucket that I stuck it in with MLIS to create an endpoint. And so now when I create that endpoint, I'm going to create a UI for it. And what that UI will do is it will accept an MP4. It'll store that MP4 on the platform, and then it'll run that MP4 against the endpoint, and then it'll predict what that is for. Now, if I combine that with a tool, maybe like Airflow, right? If you're familiar with Airflow, great for like workflow scheduling and automation. So like I always use the example of I'm 37 years old and I still am terrible with Celsius. I'm like Fahrenheit just makes sense to me, right? So if I was reading in data from a weather API, and it was in Celsius, and I wanted to do this every hour or every day, and then I want to do a transformation to take it from Celsius to Fahrenheit, and then I want to post it to a database. A great type of job that I can do in Airflow, right? To create that workflow so that I don't have to do anything. But if I can use a workflow tool like that, I can build a pipeline for all of the video assets that they have to chuck them against my processing endpoint to do all the classification. And there's some data indexing concerns in there that I'll need to address eventually. The last mile, though, is I'm going to take it and I'm going to integrate it with a video language model to give me more information about the clip. So some of these really cool VLMs to describe to me what's going on. So, and the idea being that I'll be able to, in that endpoint, have a chat with an LLM and say, show me every instance of Steph Curry running a pick and roll in the fourth quarter of a game in 2017. And assuming we do all the data side of it right and all of the indexing and all of that, then it'll be able to bring up the clips for me. Show me this is all of those clips that you requested.
So was the goal in here with the small data set was to go and train it, and then in theory, you say Steph Curry doing pick and roll, it would then be able to go through all the data and start pulling those all out.
Yep.
Okay.
I wanted to show a position for that. I built it for a customer, right, for that NBA team, just because I wanted to show them what could be done. Because it's easy to like think about things kind of like theoretically. It's a different thing to have like, this is a real model that's trained on an open source model that you can go pull down right now. And we took it and made it do something that's very interesting, right? That could actually make a difference to their organization because they have a WNBA team too. And their biggest goal in the organization is how do we get our WNBA team a championship, right? Using tools like this, analytics that maybe they have lower budget for, if it can be jointly used for both the NBA and the WNBA team, can get them a lot closer to having the types of analytics without the giant analytics staff that might be required to build that type of stuff.
So you did the 10 and the 10 training, and then did you run that on a wide database, or was that the next step after this?
That's the next step. I just did some training I did the training, and then I took some, again, clips that I hand kind of curated myself. I've pitched probably 8 to 10 clips that it hasn't seen before. The accuracy on all of the ones where they actually do pass the ball, pretty good, right? Isolation's great. It can recognize an isolation, and it can do it against others too, right? So I can do like a screen, for example. I haven't created a screen as a play type in here, but as an other, it'll recognize that that is not an isolation. So isolation, really good accuracy. Pick and roll, pretty good accuracy as long as they pass.
As long as they pass.
So that was kind of my position on how I could use this system. And if you start to take into account what can be done with MLIS, and then what can be done with Helm charts to create UIs, because I can build a UI in a Helm chart pretty simply, right? And use that. We've built, as part of our platform, we've built this Gen AI, which used to be a little bit different. It used to be called solution accelerators, and a solution accelerator is a collection of kind of these different microservices that we all stuffed together that achieved a use case. And so the first one we had was a RAG Essentials use case. And so that RAG Essentials use case was, we'll give you a space to specify these are the documents that I want to use, right? This is the model. This is the embedding model that I want to use. This is the other model that I want to use. And then you click go, and it goes and has, his Weaviate under the covers as a vector database. And it goes and uses that embedding model to create those vector embeddings, puts it in there, and then you can run the similarity search against it, and you can ask questions. And so it's a very simple, quick, and easy way where I can go and do something that might actually be meaningful. But it's a package on the platform that you can go and retrieve from Chart Museum, which is a chart repository, Helm chart repository on the platform. You can retrieve that, and you can edit it, right? So if you want a custom UI, right, or you want a different set of resources underneath it, or you want whatever, you can do that. So it's a springboard for people to do their own development on top of it. So that's kind of what we did there. And we're going to give this a whirl, knowledge base. We're going to do, and my apologies, I thought this was set up, but this, as I've mentioned, this is not my I was going to show the NBA CBA. This is not my environment that I traditionally use. Next one. Sorry for the slight lull in communication. I have a Zoom thing in my way that's, there you go, get away. I'm going to upload a file directly, and apologies, you're going to see a little bit into my computer here. This is the one thing that I didn't do because it was already built on my other system. Reynolds search, there it is. So this is the collective bargaining agreement for the NBA, and I have to move this Zoom thing again. And I'll hit upload. I'll select an embedding model. We'll use that embedding model, use that Mistral one. These are just templates. This is part of what comes from, we have auto scaling on the platform, which I think is very valuable, especially against like the cloud sometimes, or doing it yourself. The idea being though that with MLIS and with how we've deployed these, you have auto scaling here all the way to 0. So if a model is not being used or an endpoint is not being hit, go ahead and scale it to 0. When it receives another request, it'll go and scale itself back up, and you can set scaling parameters, right? So how much it could scale to before it needs more. So this is just, and there's other pieces inside of here around chunk size, overlap, right? So temperature is another in LLMs, right? That's kind of how much freedom you give it in its response, right? So is it hardline? This is specifically exactly show me just the facts, or do I give it more creative freedom, right? So there's other configuration parameters that you can give. There's system prompts that you can tell it, this is how I want you to act. I'm going to minimize this. I hope that doesn't mess anything up because it's been in my way for quite a while. And then, yeah, that is all I have to do to go and set up this knowledge base, which essentially is a RAG implementation, right? And ideally, in the next 8 minutes, this will spin up. And I can show you how we can go and query against the collective bargaining agreement for the NBA. That's all it takes. So when you talked about you're not seeing value and people like actually being able to realize value, I've done this with customers. They're like, that's all we want. That would be so valuable for us because it would save our team members so much time in having to go and find information, or it would save us a ton of time and a ton of costs in having to hire a team of lawyers to answer questions that we may very well be able to answer ourselves. It's just we kind of hate legalese and the wording of these things because it is a headache to read. So
back to the hurdles to getting there, those are the ones on the right of the step chart, because as you say, there are some real concrete benefits or use cases, and yet they're not proliferating, and those are the reasons that you listed before.
I think a lot of times people just don't know that, like unless you have someone who's really intimate with the space, you're not as familiar with what is out there tooling wise, right? Especially things that are low code, no code. That's huge, right? And this is part of the experience that we've built here, particularly with these solution accelerators, particularly with the NVIDIA blueprints. We wanted to provide quick wins for people. And this is one of my favorite components of this platform is that every customer that I've talked to has been so interested in this because they have a use case for it. A lot of times they are able to kind of concretely say, I think this will save us X, right? They're fairly able to communicate what they think this could do for their business. If they can see a win in this and then use it to gain value and then defer cost for some of their later, more stretched development efforts, they start to get really excited about it because everybody's got the long shots, right? The type of stuff that I'm doing with that, NBA classification, kind of a long shot. It's more development. It's, kind of an unknown space, but it could be really impactful for them. And most customers that I'm talking to are like that. They're like, yeah, we see some quick wins. If we can get value out of the quick wins, maybe we can hit some of our stretch goals without having to come out of pocket for it, essentially, because we've gained so much value up front with the quick wins.
How can you gauge the accuracy of it? Are there hallucinations that you have and say, show me all the collector bar?
So you can
do this, and it pulls up things that aren't there.
Yeah, you can, and I think it's actually we've done it in it's a parameter that you can kind of set on the back. I think we've actually put it in the UI. I'm not sure about this version, but you can make it cite for you, right? I can make it cite the paragraph and page for me. So like in the NBA, CBA, if this pulls up in the next 5 minutes and 8 seconds, I always ask it the same question because I know exactly where it is in the document. It's how many appearances are players required to make during the season? And it answers like 6. And then I ask it one further question. That further question is, how many of those have to be with season ticket holders? The answer is 2. That's on page 48 in section 8 of that 600, 700 page PDF, right?
Can you actually hyperlink to it? Like the way that GPL will do
yeah,
to
you can. It's not implemented in this, but yes, you could. So, gonna make a liar out of me because maybe you should have assigned more GPUs to it because, I'll spin it down in just a second here. But that's I think the purpose of it. I'd love to take some more questions. We have about 4 minutes left.
whatever happened to the fatigue problem? Did you just using that as an example of something they do want to do that would work well with this? Or
No, that was just an example that they thought of that got me thinking about things that could be done with video, right? And I think fatigue is probably, if I really want to approach that problem, I think I really have to work with them because they're the ones who have all of the video assets, right? And they do have some kind of like data management, data indexing. Like they have an idea of where some of their assets are. And so it would be a lot easier for them to turn me onto a larger set of data that actually would show that information. My ultimate goal, though, is I want to gamify this because I think that would be like the ultimate cool thing where it's like, if I can take this and say, great, based on these players on the floor in this given situation, what is the expected value of running this play in this scenario? Right? If I can take that, and that's part of why I started setting up the play classification because I wanted to say, okay, this play, and part of this that I also set up that I didn't show, there's a video chunker now. So I can go through an extended clip and I built a video chunker, and it does it by like 2 different ways: by play, right? So by possession change, or by scenery change, right? So like clips. If you have a highlight clip reel, right? I can do, is it a scene change or not? And I can create chunks of that video. So every time it sees a scene change or a possession change, it clips it and creates, an atomic clip, right? So that gives me kind of the start of, I've taken all of those long running videos and I've put them into manageable clips that I can now classify. Did it result in a score or not, right? And then I can go further with who was on the floor, ultimately, hopefully leading towards that gamification effort where I can say, great, what's the expected value with if you bring your 6th man in and sit your 2 guard, what's the expected value given these conditions?
Well,
That's ultimately what I'd like to move.
wouldn't the most value from that actually be able to analyze it real time during a game?
Mm-hmm, for sure. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the next thing is a headset for Jordan Ott that you can just,
Yeah.
tell him what to do next, or just take his place.
You could
Yeah.
take Moneyball to put on steroids as far as who do you want to put together the best amount of value that you can put players together that would work better as a team than individual stars, and what are their salaries, and be some pretty cool things you could do with it.
Yeah, we're
This
going
was actually their
AI's final contribution will be to revolutionize the game of basketball.
This was actually one of their ideas. They wanted to be able to understand who they should go out and acquire to make the most compelling lineup, right? So that was definitely one of the ideas that they were thinking about. It's like Moneyball, just with basketball. It's very interesting to me because like when you see like the NFL, if you watch the NFL, they always have like that type of pass hasn't been completed in 24 years in that given situation, powered by AWS. And I would have thought that all sports teams would have had kind of a similar level of analytics, but what I've kind of found in beginning this effort was that it really, some of them don't. So there's still a ton of really interesting opportunity, and being that AI is on the rise, trying to put some cool stuff together for that space.
And as new rules are introduced, which players are going to do better and which players are going to do worse, and how do you reshape your team to take advantage of it? Possibilities are endless, fascinating.